The Land of the Rising Sun is fascinating to many of us in the West. The land that gave the world samurai and sushi holds a lot of mystique, but some of it is just straight up myth, even in the modern world. Number 10. Anime is not the biggest form of entertainment. Anime is a $20 billion industry, and there's no denying its popularity. The West is only now coming to embrace anime culture, and fans of the medium are now comfortable expressing their interest in it. For many years, it suffered the same fate as comic books or sci-fi, considered to be the realm of nerds and social outcasts. As Western audiences open up more to anime, the idea that it must be just as popular, if not more popular in Japan, seems to make sense. If anime originates in Japan, surely it's loved there. But that's not entirely true. Anime is definitely popular in Japan, but manga is more popular. Manga is generally considered the more adult or refined version, the books on which a good deal of anime is based. For many in Japan, an adult fan of anime is considered an otaku. The word has made its way into the West, and many anime fans will openly call themselves an otaku, but it's used in the way that someone would call themselves a nerd. They originally used the word as an insult, and to many it still is. The word otaku means your house and denotes that you're a shut-in. It's the equivalent of when someone on social media accuses a person of living in their mum's basement. So even though the anime industry is a big business, there's still a social stigma attached to it, and often fandom is frowned on, at least in some circles. Number 9. Japan has very little crime. One of the big things you'll often hear about Japan is just how safe it is. Crime rates in Japan are very low. In fact, crime in 2020 had dropped for the 17th year in a row in Japan, which sounds amazing. But there are some unfortunate facts that are often overlooked when it comes to understanding crime in Japan. Violent crime, like murder, is definitely low in Japan, but there are some stats that are alarming. In particular, are the stats about sexual assault. In Japan, it seems that it's par for the course that women are going to be groped by strangers on the subway. By the government's own admission, nearly 95% of incidents involving sexual assault are not reported to the police. The number is shockingly high and cuts straight to the heart of a serious and ignored problem that pervades the culture. Sexual assault and rape in particular are considered embarrassing topics in Japan. Worse, officials make victims feel like they are responsible. In some cases, they force victims who report crimes to reenact the crimes with life-size dummies in front of investigators. Even the definition of rape has been problematic in Japan. Until 2017, the legal definition of rape in Japan only included a man penetrating a woman's vagina. Anything else didn't meet the definition. Even after the definition changed, it needed to be accompanied by violence or intimidation. So anyone who was drugged or didn't fight back wasn't legally raped either. And because of that, crime statistics in Japan are not always as cut and dry as they seem. In addition, Japanese justice relies heavily on confession. They can hold suspects for nearly a month, and questioning borders on torture. False confessions are common, and real statistics are hard to determine. Number 8. Whale meat is not popular. In North America, the idea of anyone hunting whales offends most people. That's where the whole Save the Whales campaign came from in the 1970s. Countries like Russia, Norway, and Japan had traditionally hunted whales, and an effort was made to end the hunt and prevent any more whale deaths. Despite the public outcry, whaling in Japan continues to this day. Ironically, the US was partially responsible for the commercial hunting of whales. After World War II, half of all protein consumed in Japan was whale, as American officials urged the country to hunt them as it rebuilt. But that was in the 1940s and 1950s. In modern-day Japan, the average citizen will eat only about 40 grams of whale meat per year. That's slightly less than the amount of beef in a Big Mac. So while the whaling industry does exist, it's not one that's meeting the culinary demands of the people. In fact, it seems mostly to exist out of spite. Because Japanese culture has historically been linked to whaling, they continue to do it because they resent outside influence, trying to make rules against it. Number 7. Sushi isn't eaten all the time. Is there any food more synonymous with Japan than sushi? It's the one thing everyone knows they eat in Japan, and it's absolutely massive in the Western world. Sushi is worth over $22 billion in the US alone. That's a lot of rice. So the industry must be even bigger in Japan. Right? Sushi is definitely a favorite food in Japan, but it's not ubiquitous like it is in North America. For many in Japan, sushi has long been a special occasion food. It's not lunch on a Tuesday, it's something for a dinner party with friends or a birthday. In the West, we know sushi because it became popular here, the same as ramen. But to reduce Japanese cuisine to sushi is like reducing American cuisine to hot dogs. It may be emblematic in the eyes of the world, but it's not what people eat every day or even every week. Japanese cuisine is remarkably diverse. A survey conducted in Japan of Japanese people found that most people ate sushi once every 3 months or so. Only a quarter of people surveyed ate sushi more than once a month. Number 6. Wi-Fi is hard to find. If you were asked to picture Tokyo in your head, you'd probably imagine Shibuya Crossing. Like Times Square in New York, it's that one location that makes it into every big movie filmed in the city, featuring big neon signs and billboards and crisscrossing of streets where literally hundreds of people will cross into traffic. It's quite a sight. It really brings to mind the kind of technological mecca that we picture when we think of Tokyo. With locations like that being hallmarks of the city, it's surprising to learn that the city is not as open technologically as you might think. If you're looking for a place to connect to some free Wi-Fi, you might be looking for a while. Unlike in the US, where most hotels, cafes, and even restaurants have free Wi-Fi for customers, Japan is not a hotspot for hotspots. Free Wi-Fi can be found in some hotels, but in the lobby only, if at all. Most of the reason for the lack of Wi-Fi is that nearly every cell phone plan in Japan comes with data. If everyone has access to the internet already, they don't need to set up Wi-Fi hotspots. Even those who use their laptops for work bring their mobile phone with them so they can access their own network. Technically, Japan is very connected to the internet, there's just not a lot of Wi-Fi. Number 5, you're not likely to find underwear vending machines. Yes, this is a rather off-putting topic, but it's one that has been tied to Japan, at least on the internet, for years now. The idea that you could just go to Japan and find a vending machine that sells underwear has been one of those lowbrow jokes since photos of the machines first started circulating online. Japanese culture features a lot of quirks, like any culture does. In addition to the prevalence of anime and manga, Japan also produces hentai, which is the adult version of anime. Seemingly spun out of this hentai came the used panty vending machine. It was just what it sounded like, a machine that sold used undergarments. There are red light districts in Japan that sell a number of adult-oriented themes, and people have gone to Japan to try and find these machines. There are actually some in adult-themed shops, but the wording on them is confusing to those who aren't native Japanese speakers. These machines will sell underwear, but it's not used. They're just made to look like they are, likely preying on the sorts of people who would buy such things in the first place. Word is these kind of things were for sale many years ago, but the government has cracked down on them considerably. So were there one or two of these machines in Tokyo at some point? Yeah, probably, but don't expect to find them today. Number 4, Japan is remarkably wasteful. If you've seen any video of the hustle and bustle of downtown Tokyo, the first thing you probably noticed was the sheer number of people. The city really is packed, with almost 14 million people living there. That leads to something you may not have thought of. With that many people, Tokyo is incredibly clean. Surprisingly, this stems back to the sarin gas attacks back in 1995. They removed trash cans for fear that they might hold the deadly gas in future attacks. The people adapted by carrying their garbage with them and bringing it to work or to home to dispose of. The result is one clean city with no garbage cans. This gives the illusion that Japan is not particularly wasteful, but it is an illusion. When it comes to food in particular, Japan wastes massive amounts. The country dumps 620,000 tons of food every year, thanks in part to curious beliefs about food safety and sanitation. In post-war Japan, there was a clear lack of regulation and sanitation regarding food, which led to sickness. Strict standards were instituted, but never relaxed, even after the country was rebuilt. This led to a very strict and regimented attitude towards how food should look and be consumed. They would discard some food after it's sitting on display for just a single day. Packaged foods that can stay on a shelf for a year in America will be gone within 6 months in Japan. In addition, regulations are put in place to prevent short orders. That means if a store orders 100 apples but only 80 can be shipped, the shipper owes the store the money that they would have made selling those 20 missing apples. In order to compensate, producers will grow more than they need to ensure that no order is short. That leads to excess that ends up being thrown in the garbage. It's a systemic problem and one that they're trying to change, but the process is slow. Number 3, Japanese college is a joke. There's a very common belief in the West that they work Japanese students like dogs. School is a grind, but the end result is a lot of really smart and highly educated people ready to take on the world. And it's true that in Japan, school is pretty intense for children. They've got a lot of expectations put on them, and the path to college is not for the faint of heart. But then, when you get to college, there's a seriously noticeable shift. College in Japan is treated like something of a joke, not just by students, but by everyone. It's understood that once you've made it to college, you really don't have much left to do. Even in a 4-year college, the expectation that you're going to slack off and barely study is pervasive. College was the destination, and you don't have to do anything once you're there. In fact, it seems remarkably difficult to actually mess up and fail in college once you're accepted. The experience is literally described as a vacation in many places. Japanese employers tend to only look at a student's school, not their grades. They don't really care how you did. And most colleges don't make you take a lot of tests or write papers anyway, so the hardest part of many courses is simply showing up. Number 2, Japan is not as tech-savvy as you might think. Japanese businesses have long been at the forefront of many technological innovations. Companies like Sony, Toyota, Fuji, and countless others hail from Japan and have been at the forefront of tech innovations for decades now. So it's kind of surprising to learn just how non-tech savvy the country is at the ground level. While North Americans are busy streaming new shows on Netflix, HBO Max, Amazon Prime, and Disney+, the residents of Japan are only just now slowly adopting streaming as a viable platform for entertainment. Video rental stores are still hugely popular. DVD rentals and sales, as well as CD sales, are still remarkably big there. Music stores, a big business. In 2016, they accounted for almost $2.5 billion in physical music sales. In 2018, streaming services only just managed to catch up to physical media in terms of overall sales. Even in terms of how things are paid for in Japan, the country is slow to embrace technology. Cash is still king, with electronic payments like debit and credit lagging behind many other nations. E-commerce in general is not nearly as advanced in Japan as it is elsewhere. For the size of the country and its economy, it's remarkably afield of the US and China. Part of this may stem from the fact that tradition seems to be important in Japan, and for all the innovation on the business level, on a social level, people stick to what they know. Number 1, Japan is not that expensive. Most Westerners have heard for years that Japan is expensive. Hotels, travel, meals, it all costs a fortune. The truth of the matter is far more complex, of course, and why shouldn't it be? Saying it's expensive to visit Japan is like saying it's expensive to visit America. It could be if you stay at swanky Manhattan hotels and eat at Michelin-star restaurants, but what if you don't? At least one traveler from abroad who had feared Japan due to its prices finally took the plunge in 2021. Based on her travels, which ranged from Tokyo to Osaka with stops in Kyoto, Hakone, and several others, she was able to travel, eat, and sleep in Japan for $95 a day. That's a pretty reasonable budget for travel. Travel in Japan is often made more expensive than it needs to be. Obviously, fancier restaurants will have higher prices. Cities like Tokyo will often have more expensive tourist districts than smaller cities. But it gets worse. Sites like Booking.com have been found to charge up to 37% more for hotel rooms than Japanese booking sites charging for the exact same rooms. So, some of the expense of the country is artificially inflated to prey on tourists. These costs extend beyond tourism. Living in Tokyo is cheaper than it is in many major Western cities. You'll spend 40% less on a 2-bedroom apartment in Tokyo than you will in San Francisco, and it's 23% less than London. Of course, Japan can be expensive, but so can any place. The pervasive myth that Japan as a whole is always more expensive just doesn't add up. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe, and as always, thank you for watching.